What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Johnny Mack here. Just wanted to give you a heads up that if you are looking for a community that is open to discussion as far as mentorship, conservation, the wild, becoming a better person, and all of that, there is a group for you on Facebook, and it is called Soul Seekers. Soul Seekers, we are all about making ourselves a better person. We're all about making sure hunting lasts for generations to come and encouraging people to get plugged in. Whether you are someone who has something to give or someone who needs to soak it up like a sponge, this is a community for you, and I strongly encourage you that if you're on Facebook to join Soul Seekers, and if you're not on Facebook, hop on there just for that group. It is only going to be as powerful as we all make it. And so just remember that life happens for you, it doesn't happen to you, and that you can't outgive good. You can't outgive good, people. I want you to understand that, and I want you to believe it, because when we believe that and we lead with courage and we lead with intention, lives are changed, lives are transformed, just like on this podcast, transformation through primal adventure. Be blessed. Enjoy this episode. Talk soon. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I'm on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship as conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters, both new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by T&K Hunting Gear. If you haven't heard about T&K, then it's about time you do. I've been using T&K gear out in the field and on hunts and have fallen in love with their stuff. T&K is veteran-owned and 100% made in America using only American-made products. All their gear is covered under a lifetime warranty with no questions asked. If it breaks or fails, they will fix it or replace it for free. T&K is your resource for bino harnesses, bow slings, and a lot more amazing gear. For more information about T&K hunting gear, go to tnkhunting.com or search for them on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Freedom on and stay soulful. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by the Crazy Elk Company. Based out of the state of Washington with products made in America, they are providing solutions with gear to problems you didn't even know you had. Their tag wallet is one of those solutions, and I had the pleasure of using it on all of my hunts this last year, and it is now a mainstay in my kill kit. The tag wallet is a water-resistant zippered pouch that comes with its own reusable zip ties to safely and securely store your notch tag for quick and easy access. For more information, go to crazyelkcompany.com and use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. Be blessed, everyone, and as always, stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and today I'm joined by just an absolute wonderful individual out of the Midwest, Chris Hamm of HHA Sports, and he is just a wonderful individual that, as I have gone through this podcasting world and created relationships and communications with all sorts of different people, you never know who you're going to run into. And Chris is one of those people who I have developed a relationship with, and I have just really admired, and I want to share his story and everything that he is doing with all of you, because, you know, this podcast, the motto is transforming lives through primal adventure. Along with that, you can't outgive good. The whole point is that when you are putting good out into the world, we do it not for ourselves. We do it for the joy it brings to give to others, and things just naturally come back around. Well, part of that is what Chris is doing with his nonprofit, and we're going to be diving into that. But Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to be on here.
Yeah, it's always good. It's always good to be a part of the Soulful Hunter and get vulnerable and get deep and not just talk tips and tactics all the time, and share some great love with the world and humanity. So for all the listeners who are not familiar with HHA, because out here on the West Coast, HHA as far as the archery world, at least for me, being a newer hunter, I'm familiar with the brand, but I'm not really familiar with HHA. So can you go ahead and then break that down for all the listeners?
I sure can. Yeah, two of our bigger competitors are out near dirt, so we fight with those guys every year to try to gain more market share and go west, young man. I guess would be our motto for for HHA. But yeah, I've been blessed to be in this industry for almost 40 years. I'll be 46 in May. My dad started our company in 1984, so I was 9 years old. It's the only job I've ever had. I was the kid with the squeaky voice on the phone, and now I'm one of the co-owners with my brother. And my dad passed a couple of years ago, so we're trying to carry on his legacy and just continue to build on the great principles of this company that he started back in 1984. So
And HHA is specifically all archery products, whether it's like sights and stabilizers, releases, or arrow rests. Is that pretty much what encompasses HHA?
it is, yeah. About 10 years ago, we got into an adjustable crossbow mount, but I mean that's, I guess, depending on who you want to talk to, crossbow is a form of archery. So all archery accessories for now. Who knows? Maybe at some point we diversify, but we've been so darn busy making bow sights and now getting back into the stabilizer game this year and making arrow rests where we don't have time to spread ourselves too thin at this point. So
I love it. And what's the home state? Where's HHA located at?
we are in Wisconsin. So
A lot of cool things happen in Wisconsin. A lot.
yeah, we got big deer. We've got a lot of cheese, a lot of cows. Green Bay. What else do you need, right?
Yeah, you guys, I hear, are really good at cutting the cheese up there in Wisconsin.
Yeah, more ways than one, unfortunately.
Just kidding. I love it. Well, Chris, part of what I love about your story is your journey of being raised within this industry of the hunting community, but then finding yourself and going on this journey of identifying really what is important in your own life. And through that comes, the archery, the hunting, and then so much more. So give a little background on who you are, where you're from, and what's led you to where you are now, and then eventually we'll get into this nonprofit.
You bet. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the only job I've ever had since I was 9 years old. I was actually born in Minnesota because my parents were both born and raised in our, literally miles from where I'm sitting right now. But then Dad had to move to Minnesota to find work in the mid '70s, so I was born out there. But we came back to Wisconsin when I was 3, so Wisconsin is all I've really ever known. Um, and growing up, you know, basically right out of high school. I was going to go to a 4-year college, going to my dad's alma mater. And I'll never forget this. I was sitting in biology lab the night before Thanksgiving, my first semester of college, of cutting a rat apart. And I'm like, what in the heck does this have to do with bows and arrows? And so I decided right then and there I wasn't going back, but I was scared out of my wits to drive home and tell Dad, sorry, I don't really want to go back second semester. So he was okay with it, but he said, I'm not just going to hire you on full time at 18 years old. You got to have some kind of post high school education. So long story short, went to a tech college for a couple of years. And that really, I kind of found my feet there because I went to a fairly big high school. Um, I was a tall kid. It took me a while to grow into myself in high school. And I loved basketball. That was back in 80s, mid 80s, early 90s. Michael Jordan, big deal. Um, and, uh, but I didn't apply myself to the basketball at all. I was more concerned about working for Dad and hunting. And so I lost my coolness card in high school the day that I got cut from the basketball team, and that really, I don't want to say it messed me up, but once you're not a cool kid anymore, that can be kind of hard on somebody when they're 15, 16, 17 years old. So
I just want to
that
interject right here because I can relate as a former athlete. So I played 3 sports in high school. I played 2 college sports, and my dad is a Hall of Fame football coach here in the state of Washington, and so I had this identity as an athlete, or I am, the whole affirmation of the I am statements, right? I am whatever. And then the issue is that sports end. Whether it ends for you in middle school, high school, college, or beyond, at some point, it is not life. It is something that it's a recreational, it's fun to do, it teaches us life lessons. And yet so many people find identity in it. And it's devastating when we realize that as far as a foundation as a human, we build our identity upon something that is not going to last. It really can wreck us in the future if we're not grounded in who we are as a human, and specifically who we are as a person we want to be. So I totally agree with you, and I get that 100%.
Yeah, and I mean, looking back on it now, I mean, almost 25 years has passed since this whole thing unfolded. I guess almost 30, and I can see why everything. I mean, I believe everything happens for a reason. I don't think there are any coincidences. Everything that you go through is part of your story. I firmly believe that. Um, but I didn't really suffer a lot in high school. But I mean, I never went to a prom. I didn't go to junior prom, senior prom, none of that stuff. I didn't have a girlfriend in high school. I was busy working, and it's like, okay, I guess I'm not a sports guy now. I'm just going to be the business guy. So I was basically grooming to be my dad when I grew up. Once I got cut from the basketball team, and so. Uh, I graduated high school in 93, 96. I graduated tech college. And 6 months after I got there, my dad has a heart attack. And I'm holding his hand in the hospital room thinking he might not make it out of here. Here I am, 21 years old, and could potentially be running HHA sports with my brother, with our dad gone. And thankfully, he lived almost another 30 years. Um, but at that point, I became the face of our company at 21 years old. My dad only went to one more ATA show after he had his heart attack, and that was literally for I think he went to Nashville just to have an order of catfish because he liked the catfish down in, in Nashville. So he was at the show for all of about a day, and had one of our employees drive him home. Um, but that really, there was about a 5 or 6 year span there where our company started to take off, and I took a lot of that credit myself. I never told people that, but just kind of the way that I acted when I was at the shows, it's like, yeah, I'm Mr. HHA. I'm that guy. Even though I knew that my dad started the company, we obviously had a lot of great employees. I think our success went to my head, and I think I took too much credit for that. Got into drinking pretty heavy. I ended up getting married, got divorced, went down a really really dark path. Um, and that took us to 2010ish, and I was in a bad way. I mean, really, I didn't drink every day, but when I went to the shows, it was, as soon as the shows got out at 6 o'clock, I was the guy that was out till 3 in the morning, and closed up shop, and then I was back in the booth with Tylenol and Gatorade and a pounding headache the next morning, and I do it all over again. um, and then in December of 2011, I met just an awesome, awesome Christian woman that I 100% know that God sent her to me to get me out of the mess that I was in. And it took me 3 or 4 years to realize what I had. Um, and I'll be 6 years sober here in June. Don't look down my nose on anybody that does drink, but it's just not for me. I know the kind of person that I turned into when I did drink too much. Um, and I'm a completely different person now than I was 5 or 6 years ago. So.
I commend you for that. It takes a lot of self-reflection and courage to put your foot down and say no more, and let your yes be yes and your no be no, and to identify what it is that makes you a healthier person so that you can live your life. Because once again, going back to that whole, you can't outgive good. If you don't love yourself, you're never going to be able to love others. And as a husband or a father or an employee or anything, we everything that we do has a ripple effect. And so you addressed alcohol as a root of an issue. You eliminated it, and all of a sudden life starts to have its abundance, and you start to thrive in different areas that potentially you weren't. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from personal experience, I specifically see that being something that, you know, nothing holds us back in life except ourselves, right? The
Right.
whole idea of like we identify time. Well, I don't have enough time for that. Well, then obviously you don't want it bad enough, or you don't want the results from whatever you're going to do bad enough. You make time, you make decisions, you identify what it is you want in life, and from there, you go out and get it, because no one's going to stop you and no one is going to do it for you except you. So I love that. That's a beautiful story.
Well, and I mean, it's something that, even though I let the success go to my head, I mean, we have made a name for ourselves, and I've got a lot of contacts in our industry. And I think I have some influence. So now that I was one way and I'm a different way, I think I'm able to not that I'm trying to get people to jump on my boat by any means, but I do have I have been blessed with the ability to talk, to write, to influence people, and one thing that God put on my heart when I had my major life change was the veterans, and it didn't really make sense to me at the time. I'm not a veteran myself, but um, he just kept up bringing it back around. It was veterans this, veterans that. And it's like, okay, there's something to this. So that was why I decided to start going down that road, and now it's just amazing to see what's going on with that. So
I love that. So let me back it up real quick. So your nonprofit HHA USA is all about supporting veterans and encouraging them to providing them new experiences or an opportunity for what? Go ahead, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you go ahead and describe it and explain it.
yeah, so rewind back to 2014, 2015. One of the connections that I had through the industry was a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Lucroy. He was a catcher for the Milwaukee Brewers at the time. He was a big outdoorsman. Met through mutual friends. I hooked him up with some product, met him at a couple games, and I saw an article in our local newspaper that he had gone on an honor flight. And for people that aren't familiar with honor flight, that's an all expenses paid trip for World War II, Korea, and Vietnam vets to go to DC and visit that have been erected in their honor. And he had made the All-Star team shortly before that. And I texted him one night and I'm like, tell me about this honor flight stuff. And he's like, dude, hands down the coolest experience of my life. And I was like, wow, that's, here's a guy that just made the All-Star team and he's putting this honor flight thing up on a pedestal above that. So I started checking into it. We have a chapter an hour from the house here, volunteered a couple times and absolutely fell in love with what the organization was all about. It was just, you talk about doing things for good. um, I mean, to see that many volunteers, it takes several hundred volunteers to pull off a flight every weekend. When they do these, they do 4 flights a year out of our chapter.
Hmm.
And like I said, just an awesome organization. So driving home from the airport one night, I thought, well, man, I've got a great for-profit business. How can I raise money for this awesome nonprofit that I've come to love? And so I just leveraged all those connections that I built in the industry over the years. And instead of getting a new bow or a new camo suit or a new pair of boots for myself, I'd call up one of my buddies like, hey, I'm putting on some veteran shoots. Can you guys send some product out this way? And the product has started to pour in. And that was 2017. So 2017, 18, and 19, we raised almost $90,000 in Wisconsin for veterans.
Wow, all through archery shoots.
Archery shoot. So it's basically like take a 3D shoot and then take a Rocky Mountain Elk banquet and kind of mash them together.
Hmm.
And all those awesome silent auction items that you see at Rocky Mountain Elk, that's what we do at our archery shoot. So it's a 2 to 3 day event, 40 to 50 silent auction items from great archery and sporting goods manufacturers from all across the country. And then we shoot arrows, and the money goes back to our veterans.
Oh man, that's so cool. How many shoots do you put on each year, or is it one weekend? And are you traveling to do it, or?
Well, right now our 501c3 is only good in Wisconsin, so we can't legally raise money in other states. The first 3 years when I was doing it outside, when I was just a volunteer for our local honor flight, we did 3 shoots in 17, 3 in 18. We added a fourth shoot in 19. And then last year, even with COVID, we were able to have 8 events. So we put on 8 shoots last year. And we have 8 again this year, starting here in a couple weeks and running through Labor Day weekend. So
So incredible. And this is what I love. Do you have any experience in putting on shoots, or was it like, okay, we're an archery company. I know that that's an opportunity to bring people together. You can, not necessarily to use it as a promotional way, but it's like you can kill two birds with one stone, get our products out there, and also encourage people to give back towards the honor flight.
yeah, zero experience running shoots back in 2017 when I started all this. I knew that I was the archery guy. I had connections in the archery industry, so I was gonna, basically bring my circus to town and then partner with archery clubs. That was what they did. So I went to established archery clubs in the state of Wisconsin. You guys do your thing, I'll do mine, and we meet in the middle. And it's been really cool to see what's becoming of it.
Oh man, that is so special. Are you a history buff or a history nut? Have you always been drawn towards like American wars or any of that?
Not a lot. History wasn't one of my favorite subjects in school. As I've gotten more involved in Honor Flight and now with our veterans nonprofit, there's been a couple of really awesome books that I've come across. One of them came from a guy by the name of Zach Coco. He's actually a West Coast guy. He lives in Southern California, and his grandfather was a World War II vet, but he passed away before he could go on an honor flight. So Zach made it his mission. He was a photographer. He flew on multiple honor flights across the country, took awesome photos, got stories, both documented on paper and video stories of as many World War II vets as he could. And then he put together this book called Pictures for Heroes, and it's about a 2-inch thick coffee table, like a 14 by 14 square book. I mean, I get goosebumps talking about it, and it's got like 75 or 100 stories of all these different World War II vets in it. And I think I told you I'm actually going to be starting my own podcast. He's going to be one of my guests this summer because I want to hear his story. I've just we're friends through social media, but I want to have an hour conversation with Zach and just have him tell our listeners about that. Because I mean, I personally, I think that book should be required reading for anybody in the United States of America. Because I mean, our World War II vets are getting to be few and far between. In another 5 or 10 years, they're all going to be gone.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for them, I mean, that's the greatest generation. If it wasn't for what they did, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation today.
It's really phenomenal hearing you say, I believe that should be a required reading for all Americans. And that's quite a statement, especially being a school teacher. I see what books are required. Obviously, I'm removed from education being a student myself. However, it wasn't that long ago that I remember, and I talked about this on a podcast recently. I was like, reading is so important to you as a human being for retaining knowledge, for inspiration, and for growth. And yet, public education puts these books and forces these students to read books that they're not very inspiring, and so like I remember my history class, because I'm a huge history nut. Before I was going to get my degree in physical education and health, I was going to be a history teacher, until I realized history in college was more writing than it was oral history. And I'd love to sit and talk and tell you all about it. But when it came to writing papers, that wasn't really the strong suit in which I wanted to focus on. As it turns out, I'm more of a writer nowadays than I have ever been. But one of the books that stood out to me is the book that spurred on the American Revolution, Common Sense by Thomas Paine. And I was you always are taught about this book, Common Sense, Common Sense. I'm like, cool. Never once did I ever have interest in reading it, nor did teachers ever say, okay, we're going to dive into why this book actually spurred on this concept of the American Revolution. And it wasn't until last year that I bought it for the very first time, realized it was just a tiny little pamphlet of a book. And each page I'm just going through and I'm like, why is this not required reading? This
Yep.
this is powerful. And so I totally agree with you that there are certain things in which I would say America, our education system, are missing the mark on. They are, this is a whole another discussion
No,
about,
podcast.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a whole nother podcast, but I truly believe it's like in the Bible. And I know that's been something that has really hit you in your life is, don't remove your ancient landmarks which your forefathers have set before you. Why is
Right.
it so important to know our history? Because when we know our history, we can use it as a compass for direction moving forward. If we never know where we came from, just like out in the wilderness, you could be walking in circles and never know it because you don't have any identifying landmarks to keep you grounded and directed into where you want to go.
No, I agree 100%. And I mean, I'm very passionate about honor flight, and we're also passionate about PTSD. So I mean, that's where we raise our funds towards. But at the same time, I feel it's my duty to make sure that those stories continue to be told from those World War II vets. So in fact, I just got them a couple of weeks ago. But Zach sent me 8 books. He autographed every one of them. So we're going to put one of those out at every one of our shoots as a silent auction item, just so that one person's going to walk out of our shoot with that book under their arm, and I hope they read it and pass it on to somebody else. But yeah, Pictures for Heroes by Zach Coco. It's a phenomenal book.
I'm writing that down right now. Pictures for Heroes. That's so cool. And you know what they say, pictures worth 1,000 words, right?
Well,
So,
and I can't talk about it without getting goosebumps. I mean, you just look at these pictures, and I mean the stories that the faces of these men and women in this book will tell. it blows your mind. I mean, and each one of them is supported by 2 to 3 pages of writing, but you can only imagine how many thousands of stories went into that book. It's awesome.
See, that was one of the things that has really captivated me about history and the courage it took for people to live the way they did. And you go all the way back to Civil War or even prior, but the concept of like old style military engagements where you lined up across from your enemy. Front row took a knee, the second row stood there, you took turns firing, and it's just like, holy smokes. That is like I can't even put words to that concept of what these people are doing for whatever the cause, and maybe the cause is justified or righteous or not or whatever, but just within the person's standing there in that moment, talk about the courage it took. And you watch the movie Saving Private Ryan and you think about World War II and the storming the beaches of Normandy, and these barges are coming up to the beach and they're like, get ready. And they lowered that front door and just all the machine guns, and incredible.
Yeah,
Incredible. Where is the courage in humanity these days, it seems like?
yeah. That's well, like you said, that would be a whole nother podcast. But one of the other books that I picked up talking about the Green Bay Packers, one of our honor flight chapters is based out of Green Bay. And there's 100 and I think in fact I just put a post out on Instagram before we got on here. I think there's 128 chapters of honor flight across the country in 45 states. Um, but the one in Green Bay, it's called Old Glory Honor Flight, and I love their logo. It's got like one of the old like World War II bombers on it. It's just a really classy, cool looking logo. That's kind of a rabbit trail, but they're the only honor flight to ever send a group of Vietnam veterans back to Vietnam.
Mm, wow.
I mean, going to DC is awesome. I've been to DC twice as a guardian, as a civilian, and that's an amazing experience. But they had the idea a few years back to send. They ended up sending 52 Vietnam veterans back to Vietnam, and they called it Return to Nam. And they put a book out on that. I'm about 2/3 of the way through that right now. But you're reading all those stories of the guys that went over there, and then the back of the book is all them reflecting, 50 years later now, going back to that country and even visiting some of the people that they fought against. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff. So
Yeah, totally. What explain to the listeners what is an honor flight? Because is it someone hopping on a military plane? Is it someone hopping on a commercial flight? Are they escorted? Like what exactly details an honor flight? And then how do you nominate people for it? Because if you know someone in your own local community, how can you honor these people who have fought and sacrificed a lot in their own lives for the greater good of this country?
yeah, so an honor flight. In fact, last year I actually friended the gentleman that started the original honor flight. He was in the military for 20 years. He was out of Ohio, and back in 2004, 2005, he was on the medical side of things in the military. So he was giving checkups to a lot of these World War II vets, and he was starting to see them age. And I think at that point, right around 2002, 2003 is when the World War II memorial went up. And so he just asked one of them one day, "Hey, have you been to the memorial in DC that they built for you and everybody that you served with?" And the guy, I think he replied like, "No, I'm getting too old. I can't make it." And so at that point, Earl Morris is the gentleman's name. He had the idea that I'm going to fly some World War II vets out to DC, and I'm going to do it at no cost. And so he had like 300 pilots that he knew in Ohio, and he basically asked them who's willing to go, and like 12 guys raised their hands and said, "We'll do it." So the first honor flight, they sent like a dozen World War II vets to DC. That's how it started in 2004, 2005.
On all
But now
private jets or something like that, or
I think it was private jets, the first ones, but now they have like we have I think is it Sun Country? Forget what our airline is, but yeah, it's basically a commercial plane that we send 100 and about 150 or 160 people go on our honor flight every time it goes. So there's about 110 vets, and then you can go as a guardian as well. Some people, some of these guys or gals need to be pushed in wheelchairs, so then the usually a guardian will get assigned, 2 to 3 vets depending on their level of handicap. Some of the Vietnam vets and guys can walk around just fine, so they don't actually need a guardian. But yeah, so it's basically it's a most of them are a 1 day trip. Ours we get up about 4:30 in the morning, rouse the vets out of bed. One of the local hotels puts them up free of charge. Get them to the airport. It's wheels up by about 7 o'clock. We touch down in DC like 9:30, and then there's coach buses waiting at the airport. And the minute they come through the tunnel, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people applauding him. Here's another honor flight in DC for the day. People shaking their hands, thanking them for their service, and so they get that before they even get out to the buses. And then the buses are all police escorted to all the memorials in DC.
Man,
It's like front line at Disneyland. So
wow, it's so incredible. I did actually just start to get chills right there because when I started to think about that, and every time I highly encourage people that every time you see a veteran out in public, to thank them. Whether they are a veteran of foreign wars or not, it's a choice that they made to sign up and be a part of it. And once again, it goes back to that whole courage aspect. I had a recording, and the episode is going to be coming out, or by the time this episode releases, it will already be out, with a guy who founded Wishes for Warriors, and the concept of taking care of these people. And so the other thing that you mentioned is PTSD, and you have a heart for that. And I was just browsing through some social media, and what is it, 22 veterans a day commit suicide.
yeah,
So
yeah,
sad.
I think that number, I don't have confirmation on that, but I think that number has gone up since the pandemic. I know the suicides in general have gotten worse since the pandemic. So it's yeah, that was one thing that when I started HHA USA, when I was raising money just as a ground volunteer for Honor Flight, all our monies went back to that. But when I started HHA USA, I partnered with 3 other vets nonprofits that their sole purpose is to get servicemen and women out hunting and fishing to help combat PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
So partnered with I got to know Adam LaRoche, part of the Buck Commander. He was a professional baseball player for quite a few years. Adam's got his own E3 Ranch Foundation, so we partner with him. Wounded Warriors in Action is another one, and then the Neestead Foundation. So all 3 of those groups, that's what they do, is they get servicemen and women out hunting and fishing. So the first 22% that we raise every year gets divided into 3, and we send checks off to those folks to do what they do. So
Man, so powerful. I love it. And this just goes to show you can't outgive good. One of the questions, and I'm not asking monetary, is what is doing all this, being a part of all this, do for you as a human?
I mean, it's just something that, to me, I mean, for the first 40 years of my life, I was all about, Chris, what can I do to get a new truck, to build a bigger house, to sell more bow sights? It was all about me. And then when I got born again, I just went like this with my hands, and it's like, okay, or I've been blessed to have so much in my life. Who can I bless in return? I felt an obligation to give back because of my success. And so I mean, there's nothing that brings me more joy than to be able to write those checks to the guys, at E3 Ranch Foundation and these other honor flights, and know that that money's going to go to recognize our veterans.
Yeah.
That's just, you talk about. I got a chuckle when you said that you encourage people to thank a veteran when they see him. That is something that, we live in a pretty small town here, so we don't have a lot of local grocery stores. So I shop groceries primarily at Walmart, and so anytime I'm in Walmart, I'm on constant lookout for the veteran hats.
Yep.
And I mean, there's days where I might not see any. There might be days where it's like 3 or 4, and it's so cool to have those conversations. And it takes absolutely nothing. Because I mean, people will ask us, well, how can I support your organization? I don't live in Wisconsin. I can't come to one of your shows. I don't want to donate any money. Do what you and I are talking about. When you're at Walmart, take 30 seconds or 5 minutes out of your day. And if you see somebody in a veteran hat, thank them for their service.
Yeah. And I do want to encourage all you listeners out there who, if you are, especially, this is a touchy topic, so I'm gonna navigate this with sensitive gloves. In the world of COVID and masks, there has been less social health, and everyone's concerned about like this physical health, but through the masking of everyone, it seems like society has deteriorated as far as social health and being able to conversate with each other. And so more often than not, you see people like avoiding each other if you're walking near anyone, and eye contact, and I don't know, maybe that person's going to get me sick or I'm going to get them sick, and this whole weird dichotomy of how to navigate social settings. At the end of the day, lead with love and lead with courage. And it doesn't take much to smile at someone. It doesn't take much to say thank you to somebody and acknowledge it and get out of your own head, get out of your own bubble, get out of your own fear-driven mindset and start putting the mindset forward and outward. And you're really going to be blown away with how much your perspective changes on life. And, I was at the grocery store and this older gentleman, was wearing the veteran hat, and I was with my young boy, and I didn't even notice him at first. It was at a self-checkout, and he was at the self-checkout behind me, and my oldest boy, was being a little 6-year-old, and, hey, can you help me with this? Yeah, and blah, blah, blah. We grabbed the bags, and we're about to head out, and he was like, hey, enjoy those days. They go quick. And I looked at him, I saw he was a veteran, and I was like, oh, sure will, sir. Thank you. And thank you so much for your service to this country. I really appreciate it. And you could tell he was wearing a mask, but his eyes lit up. And he's like, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And that's all it was, and then I went on my way. He went on his way. But, what there's a Bible verse that talks about a kind word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and plates of silver, right? And that the whole point of apples of gold and plates of silver is the contrast and how much it stands out and the value in which gold and silver hold. And you don't realize how much you invest into someone else just through a kind word.
Yeah, it doesn't cost you a dime. It might cost you a few minutes of your time. And I mean, you talk about COVID, and I mean, every one of us, our days are marked in a book somewhere. We know how long we don't know how long we're going to be here. God
Right.
does. I mean, I'm 45. I might not make it to 46. I might get run over on the way to my mailbox today. I might be here for another 45 years.
Right.
But one of my favorite verses in the Bible is John 9, verses 4 and 5. It talks about being the light of the world. And I mean, every day when I get up, I think of that. And it's like, man, I've been given a gift to help other people. And I want to be that light to somebody every day.
Yeah.
What does that look like? It might be going out and doing one of my shoots on a weekend. It might be, thanking a vet for his service at Walmart or Culver's or McDonald's.
Totally.
Something that simple. And it takes absolutely nothing. It doesn't take any. One thing that I hear a lot in ministry is it's not about ability, but availability. And I absolutely love that, because people are like, oh, I'm not talented enough. I can't do that. Well, everybody is good at something.
Yeah.
You just have to raise your hand and say, yep, I'll do it.
Yep. Just got to be.
What is your it?
Yeah, you got to be courageous. You got to just take a leap of faith. There was, growing up in this religious mentality, and I don't like talking religion because I find so much wrong with it. I do believe in a creator, and I have a relationship daily with him. With that being said, there's this concept of like charity within, specifically the Bible and giving and all this. However, in society, I don't know, in my culture at least, there was a concept of paying tithes within religion of the church, and then it was like, okay, I did my due diligence. I don't have to worry about anything else, and then that was it. Maybe as a listener, that's you or not. I don't know. This is my podcast and my perspective. This is how I viewed the world. It wasn't until I went to a leadership conference that was specifically focused on emotional intelligence and emotional training and overcoming past trauma that one of the challenges within this leadership conference was to create a fundraiser and to pick who you wanted to fundraise for. And the fundraiser had to be based in California, San Diego specifically, because that's where this was at. And being someone who's from the state of Washington, I was like, how am I going to get people from the state of Washington to want to fundraise for something that's down in San Diego. And, we're scratching our heads, and it's with a giant group as a cohort of people. And so there's like 60 of us that are all doing the fundraiser. We put on events, doing different things. And my goal, because we all had to set goals for ourselves, I was like, okay, the minimum that you could set a goal for, because you had to raise money, otherwise you were removed from this program. And the minimum that you had to raise was $500. And I was like, oh man, $500, that's a lot of money. How am I going to get people to raise $500 from Washington for this? And, it ended up being for a summer camp, or a family camp that not only takes a cancer patient to camp, but it takes their family as well, because cancer doesn't just affect the patient, it affects the community of people that they're in. So it was like a break from life. And so I ended up, digging deep in my soul, because it was really the first time outside of my humanity that I considered charity on a grander scale, not just in my church or in my neighborhood, or, mowing the lawn for the neighbor next door that is getting older and has a difficult time. And so I did this. I applied myself. As a part of Washington Backcountry and the Soulful Hunter podcast, I host community events. And it just so happened that one of my community events lined up with this fundraiser. And so I advertised the fundraiser as a part of this community event. And making a long story shorter, I ended up personally raising over $3,500 for this nonprofit in San Diego from people in the state of Washington. And that was just me. As a group, our cohort raised over $111,000 in 3 weeks for this nonprofit. And the point of this story goes to, biblically, once again, one can chase 1,000, two can chase 10,000. The minute that we gather together with a sole purpose and have an identity of what we want, the sky's the limit. So then it goes to, oh, I did that. Why am I not doing more for my own community? I did this for San Diego, which is awesome, but there's so much here in the state of Washington that I can personally do. And so now every year I host a toy drive for Seattle Children's Hospital. Not because I want a pat on the back or anything like that. It's like, I have a platform, I have an ability, I have the means to bring people together. Why are we, and I'm not putting a should on anyone, I'm not shoulding on people, but as humanity, take care of thy fellow neighbor, right? This is the concept of charity, to give. And I love what you're talking about. And, it doesn't have to be cancer patients. It doesn't have to be sick children. It could be the veterans, and whatever it is. At the end of the day, you're never going to outgive good.
True, and you're never going to outgive God. My father-in-law tells me that all the time. So, and I think about the parable of the talents in the Bible. Talk about 3 people that were given X, Y, and Z, and the guy that went and buried it in the backyard got it taken away from him. We all have something to bring to the table, and
Yeah.
what are you doing with that, and who are you doing it for, other than the guy in the mirror?
Yeah, totally. Chris, one of the questions I have for you, and it's a question I like to ask my guests when I'm on the show, is, obviously this is a hunting podcast, and this is more of a soulful episode where we're talking about giving and what we can do for humanity. You being in the archery industry, and then you being a hunter, where is the connection, and where is the soulfulness for what nature, hunting, the connecting the dots it does for your soul and ground you? Maybe it's connecting you with God, or what keeps you going?
I mean, the last thing you said is exactly what hits it on the head for me. I mean, ever since I got saved 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, that's what the outdoors does to me. And I don't even have to be out hunting. I've been blessed to have a 160-acre farm 15 minutes from here. I don't travel a lot to hunt. People think, oh man, you're the owner of a site company, you must have a trophy room the size of the Taj Mahal. No, I don't. I've got 5 or 6 decent whitetails on the wall and a bear rug from 30 years ago and shot a few turkeys and stuff. So I mean, I don't as much as I enjoy hunting, I don't trot the globe to do it. Um, but just getting out to my woods, I was out there this morning for an hour checking trail cam pictures to see what the turkey situation's looking like for my cousin that's coming down to hunt tonight. So and just that, just getting out there and granted, I still have my phone with me in my back pocket, but I'm not on my phone when I'm out in the woods. It's there for an emergency, and I'm able to check out from civilization for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, and just kind of hike around and just it really centers me in a world that's so crazy, and we're inundated with information and to-do lists. It's nice to have that luxury to just unplug.
Oh man, I love that. I love that. And I totally agree. How can people who are not in Wisconsin support you on your mission of your nonprofit for HHA USA?
Um, well, first and foremost, I mean, we do have on hhausa.org is our website, so we've got a donation button there, and that those monies will get deployed through the kind of the formula that I told folks about today. With the 22% going back to those other organizations, and then the balance of it will go to Honor Flight chapters. Uh, your story that you just shared about your San Diego fundraiser kind of struck a chord with me because about 2 months ago, I had a gentleman hit me up on Instagram. He's a police officer in Nashville, outdoorsman, archer. PTSD obviously is a big issue in the first responder and the police community as well. And he said, "I'm going to run 48 miles in 48 hours, and I'm going to raise a bunch of money, and I want to give that back to you guys." And I'm like, "Wow, that's awesome." And his goal was to raise $1,000. He raised $3,300 and change.
Yes.
And I'm like, he's going to be one of my first guests on my podcast too, because I get that question a lot. If I put a post up with one of our shoots, and they're like, "Oh man, I live in Florida, I live in Georgia. What can I do to help you out?" Well, if you want to run 48 miles in 48 hours and raise a bunch of money for HHA USA, that's a thing now, I guess. So
Yeah. I was just recording a podcast earlier with Brian Lynn of the Sportsman's Alliance. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sportsman's Alliance as an advocacy group for hunting. They stand for hunters, fishermen, and trappers and fight battles for us to maintain our rights in the courts. And one of the things that we talked about on this is like, money makes the world go round, more or less. And as much as we like to, and it's always like, oh, how do I get more money? How do I get more money? When we are generous and live in a mindset of abundance, it's this concept that it's going to be okay. We're going to be taken care of. And so how do we contribute? Well, if it's not time, it's money. If it's not money, it's time or some other, maybe someone has a skill set in marketing or social media or writing or journalism or something. That's like, there's always a way to contribute to help support something that you truly believe in.
yeah, and I mean, I feel guilty. You asked me, and the first thing I went to was our donation button on our website. I mean, um, I think back to our conversation about just thanking the veteran when you see him at Walmart or at the Dairy Queen or wherever they're at. Uh, that is something that I'm still, my marketing mind is still trying to wrap my brain around it, but I want to come up with some kind of an initiative with a catchy hashtag that's just Operation Thank a Vet, for lack of a better
Yeah,
term
right.
at this point, where when people ask, hey, that's just out there, and people will do that. Hey, I ran into Joe Smith at Walmart today. He served in Vietnam. I had a great conversation with him. Hashtag Operation Thank a Vet. Just something that simple that didn't, again, there was no money transaction there at all. It was just simply taking time out of your day to give back to somebody.
So beautiful. This is why I started the podcast, to transform lives. And sometimes that transformation happens out in the wild through the primal adventure. A lot of the times, when we are not always out in the woods, that transformation happens through us looking ourselves in the eye, in the mirror, and saying, I can do this. And then it's not just about us doing it for ourselves. I can do this and get out of my comfort zone, and I can do it for others.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a real blessing to have HHA USA, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for it. I mean, we were honored by the H in January with an award. It's sitting on my desk here. It's an impact award. When I first got the email, I was like, "This is junk." It looked like junk mail. I was going to delete it, but then I read it, and wow, this is pretty awesome. And it wasn't about me. I mean, with COVID this year, we weren't able to go to the ATA, so I had to do the acceptance of the award over a Zoom call. But my message that I left people with there, and I'll leave you with it here as well. Um, whether it's veterans, whether it's cancer, whether it's sexual abuse, anything. I mean, there's a ton of causes in this world that need attention, and there's billions and billions of people that can do something about it. So, my only regret is that I waited 40 years of my life to open my hands up. But now that I have, I'm just I'm thankful for every day that I have to give back to a cause greater than myself.
Well, you opened up this podcast talking about there's no coincidences and things happen for a reason, and so living in the rearview mirror, there's a lot of things we could always change, and yet returning back to that gratitude and being grateful for where we are and what we've done. It's everything happens with perfect timing. I love it. Chris, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of The Soulful Hunter. For all you listeners, if you were touched by this episode and you feel called to get involved or share about HHA USA, you can go to hhausa.org. And from there, you can get all the information about the shoots. You can get connected with sponsors, partners. You can donate, and you can connect with all this. And remember, you can't outgive good. And that, what we put out into the world is just naturally going to flow because there's an energy of transfer. It always is moving. Life is always moving forward, and either get in line with it or you're going to be fighting upstream against it the entire time. Chris, thank you so much for joining us for an episode. Everyone, be blessed, freedom on, and as always, stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter Podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.